Welcome to the seventh episode of Lyrically Speaking.
Where we dissect songs and discover implied inferences made by artists, singers, and songwriters. We are your hosts,
Dyuti Agarwal.
and Kesar Behal. Before we begin, we would like to announce that we are now on Spotify.
Find the link in our bio or just search up Lyrically Speaking on Spotify.
Yeah, so do that and make sure you drop a follow and a rating.
Okay, so today we're gonna move in a different direction than our usual episodes. So normally we dive into our favorite songs, but today we've decided to look into how music in movies and shows capture those fleeting, transient moments that are ephemeral. And today, joining us is someone who understands that balance between sound, image, and emotion better than anyone. Kesar, would you like to introduce her?
Yes, of course. Guys, please welcome Chaahat.
Yay!
Hello.
Hi, would you like to maybe explain a little bit about yourself, what you do, why you're so passionate about this?
Yeah, I started off with a degree in psychology actually, and then I transferred to film after I attended two classes with my friends, and I just absolutely loved the skill-based technical aspect of creating something out of nothing and just collaborating with creative people.
Especially in this age of AI where creativity can be very artificially created.
Yeah, I've always loved TV shows. I've loved films. They've been an escape for me. My TED Talk was about films. So
Mhm.
this just felt like the natural flow, and I went
Beautiful.
with it.
That's great. Let us just talk about the big categories of sound and film because I feel like music and films and cinematography, all of those go hand in hand, and I think that's really cool.
I wanted to talk about how we have made, like, I want to talk about the technical aspects first.
Mhm.
When we create sound design in films, what you watch, there's three different ways to categorize it. You
Okay.
will hear diegetic sound, which is what exists within the world of the story that you're watching. For example, when you see two characters in a car and the radio's on, we're
Hmm.
experiencing what the characters are experiencing. That's diegetic.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's non-diegetic sound, which only we as the audience will hear. So that could be like emotional music playing when someone's crying, so the
Right.
character is
Mhm.
obviously not
Yeah.
listening to that, but it's what brings the emotion out of us. And then we have source music, which is very common in like Netflix shows and films, where you have like a type of diegetic music where if you are a part of the world of the story, there's something coming from a specific source, which is like, as I said, the radio or the jukebox, but you know the source of that music. It's not
Right.
just in the back. You know that
Mhm.
something has been turned on and it's usually relevant to the story and the film. We also have like Foley's. It's custom sound effects that we record. So usually to record rain, we don't usually like go put a mic out and record the rain. It's people like tap their fingers on foil sometimes to create rain sounds. And we also have something called dialogue replacement, which is again dubbing, which we all are pretty aware of.
Right, yeah.
That's the technical aspect of sound design.
I remember for Foley when I was in Bollywood parks and I was in the Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara experience, and they had this whole like thing where the audience could come in and help in making the sound effects to understand how the filmmaking process of that worked, and it was so cool. I was working with the specific part where the bulls start raiding the entire area, and we
Yeah.
used coconut shells and we tapped it on the ground to make the sound of the steps of the bull's feet. And that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, coconut shells is interesting. And it also, like, if you think about the money aspect of it, it's way cheaper in production.
Yeah.
Like, some films are just recorded fully silent and then they record fully separately on a lower budget. It just works out. That's pretty cool that you got to experience that at Bollywood Park.
Well, let's move on.
Okay, so to start off, we're going to talk about a cinematic masterpiece that's been discussed through and through amongst literature enthusiasts and film watchers, The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Um, I watched this movie earlier this year, and I think it was one of the best movies I've watched because it explores such a vulnerable aspect of a topic that seems to be a stigma in discussion. And I think it was really important to bring it into the spotlight. So one particular scene really, really stands out to me. I think it does to the audience that's watched it as well. It's the scene where Charlie's in the back of his pickup truck, and they're all the scenes in the movie.
Yeah, I
Right.
think
Yeah.
to create like what's written in a book and adapt it into film, where you get to add sound and you get to really extract a cathartic experience from your viewers, that's something that's really interesting. I mean, recently, I don't know, have you guys watched Project Hail Mary?
Not yet. I'm
On my
planning on
watch
doing that
list.
pretty soon.
Okay, I watched it
No
and
spoilers, please.
no spoilers, none at
Yeah.
all. But the fact that everything you feel while reading the book is more like it's exacerbated as you watch the film. And you have this insane feeling, as you said, you feel ephemeral. And like this is a guy in space, which is something we all know, right? Like that's not a spoiler, but it is a guy in
Yeah.
space. It's so insane because we usually only like have such reactions when we relate to a character. But the fact that it's got like a global audience now is pretty insane to me. And even the scene that you were talking about, I think it's also interesting how we sort of stop hearing the sound, the Foley's. And that is what creates that effect, which is something we would read in the book, where slowly you don't hear the wind, you don't hear the sounds of the road. Again, those were like intentional noises recorded, but they strip that away and they take only the music out and they play with that, which really creates this experience for us viewing it. That's why sound design is kind of like the cusp of what we create in film. And without good sound design, a film can fail. You could have good direction, you could have good writing, you could have good actors, but if your sound design fails and it doesn't stick with the like viewers' expectation of sound, it can really mess up the whole film. And like these are really good examples, but then there's also films that, cannot do good sound design. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Another thing I want to talk about is since we focus specifically on the tunnel scene, that reminds me of the movie Dead Poet Society. I'm sure everyone knows it.
Oh my God.
Almost
Yes.
everyone's watched it. And although this specific scene isn't a very prominent scene, although it is important to the storyline, it's not something that entirely stands out. Um, it's definitely memorable, and that's the "Oh Captain, my Captain" line that they repeat throughout the movie. And once again, I feel like that just enhances the entire experience that the audience is going through. It enhances the cathartism that the audience experiences, especially when you reach the end of the movie and you find out what's happened with Neil, what's happened with the entire situation with his family. And yeah, I think I really enjoy it when a movie has one small detail that really ties together the whole production, the whole storyline, the whole score as well.
Right. And also, I feel like when particularly talking about Dead Poets Society, the quote, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," definitely one of the most famous ones. It brings to mind that exact scene, which I think is really, really important as well. So visually, it ties in with the musical aspect, or rather the sound design, right? We're going to talk a little bit about that later on.
Okay,
Look at us, just a
so
bunch of literature and cinema enthusiasts talking about this. It's so sweet. It is so sweet.
right.
Sorry, continue.
So when we talk about silence, one specific thing is, again, sound is all about the editing. And in film, we believe this thing where you can direct a film, but an editor redirects the whole film because an editor is just as important as the director. And so, and the reason behind that is because the editor is the one who's, like putting everything together in the way they like. And a lot of times, directors have their favorite editors that they have with them all the time. So when we look at silence, it's important to understand that you still hear sounds in silence in film. And that's because when you have like a full sound mix at the end of an edit, you have 60 to 80 tracks in the editor's um, interface. But in silence, you strip this down as an editor to like probably like one isolated Foley. And an example of this I would give is the movie Gravity. So the whole film basically is set in space, right? And because in space, there's no
Yeah,
like
yeah.
travel of sound, the only time you hear the sound is when there's movement in him. Um,
Right.
right? And he's like touching his suit or the tools. And so you hear vibrations, but you
Mhm.
don't hear any other sound apart from, the non-diegetic sound. The reduced sound kind of shows you isolation, and you really feel like alone in space with this character. And yeah, I think that's very interesting how sound design creates silence, because without the silence, we wouldn't have the reactions we have as viewers when you suddenly feel that drop in the music.
Hmm.
When you think about I Think We Were Infinite, or you think about Oh Captain, My Captain, there's a lot of silence that is used in those exact scenes.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, next time you guys are watching a movie, definitely try to like hear what actually happens when there's silence on screen, because it's quite interesting once you can like pick on it. And after studying film, all I do is like, pick on things. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Okay, so we just want to talk about the fact that a context definitely affects the sound and the structure. Chad, could you just break that down for us?
Yes, of course. So basically in the music industry, we obviously have the big names. Like I listened to Harry Styles' new album recently, right?
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And there's new music coming out like all the time, right? And this is independently produced. By independent, I don't mean that the artist is producing it independently. I mean that it's not affiliated with any streaming platforms
Right.
or any,
Hmm.
it's not in a contract with any film entities. And an example of the opposite of this would be the soundtracks of Bridgerton, right? That's the complete opposite of being independently produced. And so, what Netflix does a lot of the time is, because it's obviously cheaper compared to signing a
Right.
contract and getting the rights to a song. Like they still have to do that, but it's much easier because then you have your own rendition, and it has its own brand image too. It has its own reputation, because now when I hear even the Charlie XCX song
Yeah,
that
the
they put,
361. Every time I hear that song, I think of the scene.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so if I'm getting this right, for example, if we take F1, you know the song that Tate McRae produced
I was
Yes.
gonna say that, yeah.
for that movie,
Yes.
Just Keep Watching. Would that fall under commercial or non-commercial?
That would fall under commercial, because if you go to Spotify and you search up the song, the name itself says for
Yeah,
the
like
movie.
uh-huh. Same
So
thing for
they
Right.
for Drive, I think it's called by Ed Sheeran.
Yeah.
then they're really attaching it to that. So now Tate cannot really Miss McCrae cannot, go out
Right.
and uh, like if she performs that song even in a concert, she kind of has to mention that this is from my affiliation with the F1 movie, because now they're tied by a contract. First, I would like to know both your favorite sitcoms or shows, and what is the relevance of the theme song to your personal opinion or perception of the show?
Oh my God, I love this question. I'm so honored. My favorite show is Gilmore Girls. I think the particular theme song is Where You Lead, I Will Follow. When I think about that song, it kind of symbolizes Rory and Lorelai's relationship of being together and doing everything together, like walking through life, where you lead, I will follow. It's very symbolic. It's in the name. And I think that's really special.
For me personally, I don't particularly have a favorite one, but one that really comes to mind as something I can rewatch over and over again is Friends, because it has such an iconic theme song. I'll be there for you. Yeah, like Kesar mentioned, it really like explains what the show is about. It's really symbolic in that sense. Like the friends are always there for each other. They'll do whatever to help each other. They've been together for like 10 years. Okay, I think we should move on in terms of discussing the soundtrack in movies. Um, Specifically, one that stood out to me a lot was Dear Zindagi, a Bollywood movie. Um, and
Hey,
yeah, Kesar, you can.
no, I was just gonna say we've actually never discussed Bollywood in general apart from today. Like, I don't think we've ever mentioned like
Mhm.
Bollywood music or movies, and it's the first time that we did. So, hey, that's cool. Yeah, okay. So, talking specifically about Dear Zindagi, all right. So I think the one scene that stood out to me was where they're like on their bikes and they're
Mhm.
just going with the wind kind of, and I think Alia Bhatt falls to the ground and gets back up. I feel like that was definitely very symbolic in terms of the movie. It creates like a parallel with her going to
Her
therapy
story,
and
yeah.
yeah, her overall storyline. And then I remember Love You Zindagi was the soundtrack, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think every time I listen to that song, it reminds me of that scene.
So in films, there's this thing called mise en scène, is an umbrella term used for everything that's in the scene, whether it's the costumes, the what's sitting on the table, what's in the background, like that's called the mise en scène. And I think what's interesting about the film was also that in the beginning of Dear Zindagi, we see her so restricted. Her hair is always in a bun. She picks a fight in the airplane. There's that whole angsty song,
Yeah.
name of the song, where it was like,
In the
let's
start of the
break up.
movie, there was that song "Just Go to Hell" where she's like smashing the jars on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah, right. So there's this angst in her, which is really like shown through everything, where she's restricting herself to even cry. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, this is something I really like, it caught me when I watched it, is when she finds out about how the guy that she's with got engaged,
Yeah,
she
she
eats
eats
raw
chili.
chilies.
Yeah.
Yeah, raw chilies to cry, to justify crying. And I think that's so interesting because in the sound, you hear her like munching on it and really
Yeah.
like feeling the angst. And then she goes to like the supermarket and she throws a jar to like create chaos, right?
Yeah.
So as a character, I think she was very well written, though very stereotypical. But then what else can you expect from Bollywood? Um, in Love You Zindagi versus the Just Go to Hell, you have like this big contrast, right, in the
Yeah.
music, where Just Go to Hell is sung by Sunidhi Chauhan,
Yeah.
and she's like, I love her. I love her music
Me
so
too.
much. Yeah, she's so amazing. I attended her concert recently.
Really?
Love her so much. Yeah, she's like doing insane, and I love her music.
Hmm.
It was like a Taylor Swift concert experience, the way she like goes all out.
Actually,
Yeah, like
looks
you
of it,
should
she's
check
like
it out.
dancing and everything.
Yeah, she's got like background dancers, she's got costume
Yeah.
changes. She like goes off the rails. I love it.
Oh, that's so
But
cute.
yeah, her voice is very angsty, right? Like her
Yeah.
voice is actual real female
Rage.
rage, female emotions, right?
Yeah.
And then you have Love You Zindagi, which was like it has this childish voice. I think
Hmm.
it's I forgot the name
I
of
think it's
the
Jocelyn Royale, if I'm not wrong.
It
yes.
is.
Yeah, and she has a more mellow, very low key, like she has peaceful music, right? Like
Yeah.
that's her brand, at least my perception of it. So even the juxtaposition of the two, like to show growth, is pretty like I like it. I think it was done well.
That was a very, very delightful conversation.
We could go on and on about what we've been discussing so far. But that's where our seventh episode concludes for WLS. Thank you so much, Shahid, for being part of this episode, discussing so much, and we actually learned so much more than we knew before we had this episode with you.
Thank you for having me. And you guys have been great hosts, and you guys have been very welcoming and accommodating with all my improvised chatter.
Oh,
So I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, we declare our 7th episode of Well, Lyrically Speaking as complete.
Thank you for listening. Until next time, over analytical folks.